I'm going to be talking to Saeed Kaddoura, about senior analyst on the clean economy team at the Pembina Institute, about Bitcoining in Alberta using natural gas fired electricity. It's a bit controversial right now in Sturgeon County, where the municipal district has turned down an application from an energy company to do that. So welcome to the interview, Saeed.
Thanks for having me.
Look, what's the problem here? What's the issue with Bitcoin mining? Why don't counties like Sturgeon want it in their area?
I think a couple of things come to mind. The first issue with Bitcoin mining, especially in Alberta, is that it's really depending on the use of natural gas to produce electricity that's required to run these mines, which are essentially supercomputers that are solving complex algorithms to mine this Bitcoin. Now, this is a very energy intensive process. The more coins that we mine, the more difficult that it becomes, the more energy intensive it becomes. And then the source of that electricity becomes a big concern. A lot of times there's not a lot of eyes on sight on the types of emissions and where the trajectory of this industry is leading as a whole. So really, environment is a concern, but just the lack of understanding, I think, around how to manage its industry is really making a lot of people skeptical.
Here's what I don't understand about this issue, Saeed, from a regulatory point of view. Canada wants to bring down its emissions. Alberta has a particular problem with greenhouse gas emissions. It's the biggest emitter in Canada. And natural gas emits about half of what coal does. So it's still even though it's cleaner, it still is there's a fair amount of emissions. And it's one thing if you're going to burn gas that heat your house or used by industry to make something and employ people. But Bitcoin, essentially, I don't see the value of it, whatsoever. It doesn't employ anybody. It doesn't add anything to the GDP. It doesn't, patronize local businesses. It does nothing. So why would any province welcome Bitcoin mining so it would just simply add more emissions to its emissions total?
I think the interest in Alberta, I could say overall, isn't specifically Bitcoin mining. It's really that they're trying to attract the technology sector. So that is attracting big companies like Amazon, also smaller startups based in Calgary and Edmonton. So the exposure to Bitcoin and the interest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general is mainly because of the interest in blockchain and technology. Now, I think there's two things that we can say. An interest in an industry is not enough for us to pursue a specific application. In this case, the application is pretty harmful for the environment if it's just done the way that it's being done currently. Now, I think it's important to say that the biggest argument you're going to hear in support of using these wells to mine Bitcoin is that they come from stranded assets or gas wells that are not producing natural gas. This resource is in the ground. So what they're saying is, why don't we extract it, burn it to produce the electricity to run these mines. And then the municipalities can take advantage of the job creation as well as the revenues that they produce from leasing the land or leasing the wells. Now, the question then becomes around utility, just like you described. We're essentially taking a natural resource with a real world utility, and we're combusting that to produce a digital asset that often just makes it onto the internet, gets traded, gets used to buy specific products, or some companies are using that, to generate, let's say, investments. The question becomes, what's the real world utility of this digital asset? Bitcoin is just a small subset, I think, of the applications of the blockchain technology. But I think we have to distinguish between encouraging any type of technology from coming online in the effort to bolster a tech industry in Alberta, and then looking at the ones that maybe we should be avoiding, or if we do need to do them, how can we do them in a way that's responsible?
Okay, so let's look at costs versus benefits here. On the benefits side, the individuals who own the company, in this case, it's Mega Energy out of Calgary, and so they get to use gas from their own wells. They get to create some sort of value that they can use I mean, if they accumulate Bitcoin, it's an investment, or they can spend it in other areas. So I guess you could argue that that is value. And then there are some jobs created, I suppose, in the pipeline into gas, a little bit of job creation, and there are revenues to the county.
Mm-hmm.
So, but on the other side, on the cost side, as I see it, it's primarily is GHG emissions.
Mm-hmm. And the cost of natural gas, exactly.
Yeah. And so, how do we balance? I can see people coming down on both sides of this argument. That the economic benefits outweigh the GHG emissions, and therefore they should be acceptable. How do we resolve this?
Well, I mean, I would question that that statement in itself. Is how do you justify when is it enough to raise our emissions? I think that's a very good question. The way that Bitcoin mines operate right now, they're very energy intensive for the value that they produce, the economic value. It's just that there isn't that connection between the environmental emissions and the revenue. So if we say kilograms of CO2 produced per dollar, there isn't really any sort of mechanism that says, is this too high? Is this too low? Is this just right? Just like we have in the case of let's say the output-based pricing system that says oil and gas producers need to meet this threshold or better to be considered, a clean or a relatively clean or well-performing industry. We don't really have any type of insight on that. We don't even have a good perspective on how much is the total greenhouse gas emissions that is being produced from these mines across Canada. So I would say there could be a cost benefit analysis that's done, but to do that, we actually need to understand the big picture. It's possible on a project by project basis. In this case, I think a cost benefit analysis could be done, but it's important to have qualifiers.
Yeah, I would agree. One of the things I've discovered in doing energy and climate policy in Canada is that very often we're making policy without adequate analysis and, in particular, modeling. So for instance, if we know from the modeling that has been done that provinces like Alberta are going to need 2 to 3 times the current electricity generation by 2050. And so that's a lot of electricity that has to be produced, has to be clean and low cost. And so if it's all hands on deck to produce that electricity, then how much do we want to make available to Bitcoin mining?
I think that's a very, very valid question. And I think also I always stress the importance of understanding the underlying technology, the blockchain technology, which is a way to develop digital contracts. It's super valuable. Just because we're dismissing Bitcoin mining doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't an industry that could emerge that could operate in an efficient and clean way. We know Hut 8, for example, is a Canadian company that mines Bitcoin and I believe other cryptocurrencies, and they have an environment and social governance plan that has to do with how are they going to manage their emissions. So I think we really have to deconstruct our understanding of this technology. What are the real world applications? Invest in those, and for the ones that have some sort of utility, maybe to a public investor, I think it's important that we recognize that we could do this in a more efficient way.
Great. Well, Saeed, thank you very much for your insights. Really appreciate them.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you.